Well, hello, Vardians, and welcome back to another episode of Healthcare Boulevard. This is a podcast where we explore all career options under the healthcare umbrella. We do this by interviewing professionals in each healthcare field. Within the last 2 seasons, we have covered social workers, speech therapists, acupuncturists, physical therapists, and the list goes on. My name is Sena Kako Moore. I am a physician associate, the creator and host of Healthcare Boulevard. Please tune in on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your preferred streaming app. Without further ado, let's get into today's interview. Welcome back. We are here for another interview with Miss Kimberly Sloan. She is an RN, but has been in the medical field for a long time and has held multiple positions. So I am excited to speak with her and get into what she does, how she does it, and why she chose this path as a career option. So, Miss Kimberly, welcome. How you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you. Yes.
Good. Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and yeah, and then we'll get started.
Okay. I started out in the medical field very young. I was 19. I ended up getting into the medical field by being a medical assistant. I think I did that for maybe like about a year. And then I bridged over and went and, know, got my LVN, and I was an LVN for a long time because I was putting myself through school. And so that takes quite a while, So when you're taking like one class at night, and during the
Right.
time that I was LVN, I actually worked at ER as well. And so eventually I got my RN, and the organization actually that I work for, I've been with them for almost 25 years now.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
Okay. So you held both LVN and RN, and it's interesting. I had recorded an episode with my sister last week that's coming up in the next couple week, in the next couple days, where we talked a little bit about RN, LVN, those, sort of the differentiating scope of practice there. So I'm gonna jump right in as somebody who's
hmm
held both positions. Can you tell us more? First of all, tell us where you practice state-wise and what are some things you weren't able to do as an LVN that you are now able to do as an RN that differentiate the two positions?
I am practicing in California, and I do hold a license in Hawaii as well.
Okay.
So as an LVN, I remember before I transitioned into RN, I worked in the urgent care, and it was a really busy urgent care. And we did, as LVN, I started IVs, I inserted, catheters. We did ear lavage, um, more of assisting, the nurse when I worked on the floor as an LVN, basically
Mhm.
giving all the PO meds. So to me, the difference between an RN and an LVN, the RN is the one that the LVN reports to.
Mhm.
And the RN also administers IV medications, and call the doctor. They do more of the assessment. LVN can't do a head to toe assessment. They come in there and do a somewhat of assessment, just making sure everything is okay. But the thorough assessment is done, by the RN, making sure the skin is intact, listening to, lungs and, checking wounds and drains and all this, other type of stuff. As
Mhm.
an LVN, I did, deal with like drains and stuff like that and changing dressings and stuff like that. Um, but it really depends on what what state you're in, because there's some LVNs and they call them LPNs as well that do a
Mhm.
lot more.
Mhm.
But here in California, there is a cap on a lot of the things that you've done. But I've heard that they kind of phased out LVNs in the hospital, but now they were bringing them back, which is great because we need more team, nursing because nursing has gotten really heavy on the floor, especially after COVID.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you for that. That's essentially because I mean, as far as nursing, definitely those two titles do go hand in hand, in terms of being called nursing. And the differentiating factors can be just almost splitting hair sometimes for somebody who is not as experienced working with or working as an LVN or RN. So thank you for that, sort of getting a little bit into that. How would you
Mm-hmm.
how would you describe your current position as an RN? I saw you are doing like in telehealth. Tell us more about what you do because it seems very a little
Oh,
innovative.
yes. hmm I really love medicine. I really
Mm,
do. Um, what I do currently, because so I transitioned into this role almost a year ago.
mhm,
It won't be a year until July. But before that, I worked on the floor as a neuro stroke telemetry nurse. But now the role that I'm currently in, I work from home. And so what we do is we triage um, and, give advice. Um, based on within our scope. So, say if a patient is calling up for chest pain versus me reading the monitor, I now have to be really um, in depth about the questions that I ask, to make sure that I'm getting the patient to the safest disposition possible. So you
mhm,
really have to cue in. It's more, critical thinking than physical.
mhm.
And I've learned a lot even in this role because it was very challenging in the beginning because you're really having to you versus being able to walk into a room and see a patient and just be like something doesn't feel right, right? You still
Right,
get that
right.
something doesn't feel right over the phone, but it's more you have to ask questions. Now,
Yes.
with the telehealth, we do have ways where patients can upload photos. So, say for instance, they got into a skateboarding accident and they have a laceration across their head. They take a picture, they can upload it, so we can see it as well. And then we also do have like a video where we can kind of look and, kind of examine them,
Mhm,
versus me hearing a person with their breath sound, um, with my stethoscope, I do more hearing over the phone because you can actually hear when a person is wheezing or when they're
right.
having stridor or if they're not speaking in complete sentences, you know that they're having shortness of breath. So
Mhm.
I really can't wait to they really tap into more with telehealth. It's the up and coming thing now.
Right,
So
right. Yeah, absolutely. If anything, we might say that that's one thing COVID left us with. One
uh-huh.
not totally bad thing. How about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um
yeah.
that COVID left us with. But thank you for that. Telemedicine overall, like in all capacities, RN, PA, MDs, the opportunities are definitely growing in that regard. I mean, there are like
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
practices that are like that only practice telemedicine, some providers, some of my patients, and I'm in
Mhm.
him onc, they're like, oh, my provider, my PCP only does telemed now for the most part. So a lot of people have had made
Mhm.
taken advantage of that for sure. What demographic are you working
Absolutely.
with? I
Mhm.
will imagine it's more adult, but tell us more about that.
Actually, it's all ages, believe it or not, because mothers
Hmm.
who just gave birth will call up about their, newborn and saying, well,
Mm,
the baby is fussy or haven't had a bowel movement. They may have had their first meconium but didn't have another bowel movement for another 2 or 3 days, things like that. Or we get pregnant women who call up who've been having vaginal bleeding. Um, we get people who call up for chest pain or who call up for stroke symptoms or who
mm-hmm.
call up who just had a seizure. The family may call up on their behalf. There is a wide variety of calls and of ages and of different backgrounds. So it's just like not just the one thing. It almost kind of reminds me of emergency room because
Mm-hmm.
we get everything in the emergency room. So you will be surprised. We get psych issues. We get every single thing. You never know what the call is going to present. So yeah, keeps you
Interesting.
on your
Interesting.
toes.
And do you work
Yeah.
with are you consider part of the PCP team or in terms of like family medicine? Is that the specialty you would
No,
consider?
it doesn't fall under like a specialty. It
Mm.
really falls under like telemedicine uh, specialist, because it's just everything. I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
everything from spider bites to motor vehicle accidents. Like it could be absolutely anything. It really
Wow.
should be.
Wow. Before you
Yeah.
transition to telemedicine, what setting were you working with in as an RN?
I was working in a stroke telemetry unit in Hollywood out in Sunset. And it's a stroke gold certified, you know, uh, hospital. And so we got
Mm-hmm.
a lot of patients who came in who had strokes due to, maybe uncontrolled blood pressure that went into AFib. And from AFib, if they threw a clot and they had a stroke. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why we're so on our patients about making sure you control your blood pressure and your heart rate and all those things.
Right.
But during that time, I also floated. So I would float to like, neurosurgery or orthopedic. But my main focus was stroke telemetry. So you had to be, niche certified because you had to go in and do like a thorough stroke assessment. And,
Mm-hmm.
timing is of the essence when it comes to a stroke. So that was my setting. Yeah.
Mm,
hmm
okay. Okay. What is overall in your RN level and even including LPN, what would you say are some of like your favorite part of your position?
Uh, for the LVN, I worked urgent care, which I loved urgent care because I actually worked with PAs, MDs, a medical assistant, LVNs, and RNs. So it's very much a team effort. So I really loved that part, you know. But as far as like what you know, what I enjoyed the most is mostly probably working with the whole everyone within their scope, because you got to see a team effort. I don't really see any teamwork when I worked on the floor, but I
Mm-hmm.
will say the most rewarding part when I before I transitioned into this role is when patients would come back and they healed from their stroke, like that just
Mm,
was like so like amazing, because one thing about a stroke, it hits all different parts of the brain. It can be on the left, the
mm-hmm.
right, like in the back, and so depending on where it's at, that's the severity of, recovery. But
Mm,
I've seen them where they worked really diligently and hard and almost had I can say not 100% because you're never completely 100%, but at least, 85. I'll say
mm-hmm.
that. And that to me is amazing. That was the most rewarding part of my job
Right.
working in telemetry.
That's exciting. Let's dive a
Mhm.
little bit more into your education. Because you
Sure.
did hold different positions, I want to take advantage of that and shine some light onto how was your educational transition from um MA medical assistant to LVN slash LPN depending on
hmm
where you are. And then
hmm
we'll talk about from LVN to RN.
Well, I was actually in college. I graduated high school, went to college, but unfortunately, I was the first person to go off to college, and I didn't really have a lot of support and people who were around me who knew financially and what other things. I was like in like a TOP program, which is for like low economic, people who come from low economic backgrounds. But I just could not afford it. And so I disenrolled myself and I ended up going into like this um it was like a little course with a school called Bryman. It was so long ago. Oh my gosh, I'm revealing my age. But the program was maybe 8 months. I did the program and that was to help me, excuse me, to get in through to try to go back into college. But I didn't. I actually found out that I can just go to a community college and go ahead and get my RN. So that was the plan. Excuse me. But then I stumbled across LVN program that was like a year and a half because it was an evening program. So I said, let me just do that. Then that way I'll make more money.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
You okay?
So I got it. Yeah, it's all that talking I did all night. But I'll drink a little water. But
Yeah, that will help.
the LVN program was a year and a half, and I finished that. And of course, I made more money and transitioned into the ER, and I love ER. But then I went to school to. I wanted my ultimate goal was RN because I feel like it was my calling.
Mm,
And so I went into for my RN to do the prereqs. But once again, when you're working, full time and doing those classes, um, at night, you can only maybe do two classes at night. You know what I'm saying? Versus somebody who has a support system that can go to a junior college and
mm-hmm.
knock those classes out in a year. If you're
Right.
full time, you're knocking those classes out, and then the program itself is only 2 years. So technically, to be an RN, it's literally only about 2.5, 3 years. I'll say 3 years for your prereq. And a lot of times it's even faster than that because a lot of the high schoolers now are already taking courses in high school. So I
Mm-hmm.
worked with a lot of nurses who were only like 21. So for me, it took a while. And I didn't have children or anything like that, but it just took a while because I was financially supporting my own self.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, you have, stumbling blocks that come along. But then I eventually, finished up my prereqs, and then I got into the RN program. Now, as an LVN, it's only an additional year. So I did a bridge program. So my prereqs is what was taking me so long, but the program itself was only a bridge program that was a year because you
Mm-hmm.
test into third semester. So you just do third and fourth semester, and that's it. Not all schools have this. I went to Cypress Community College, and that's where I graduated from. So of course, you really have to be on top of your stuff because they're testing you out of the things that you should have already learned in first and second semester, so you can be exactly on board with the nurses, the nursing students who are going into third and fourth semester.
Mm-hmm.
So which is advanced. Um, it's medium, like what do they call it? Like level 3 of med surge, and then you
This.
go into
Mm-hmm.
fourth semester with advanced. Yeah. So that's how that worked. And then I graduated, and I went off and got my bachelor's degree along with my public health nursing certification. So for me it
Gotcha.
took a long time, but it does not have to take that long. So I don't want nobody to be discouraged. But a lot of people are doing it that way because everybody doesn't have that support system. But those who have the support system, you can get your RN in literally probably about 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, and then the LVN. Say for instance, you go to LVN right out of high school. I think you have to be like 19 or something like that, 18 or 19. You can do the LVN course and do a year and a half, and then do your RN a year, and it
Mm-hmm.
still could take you 3.5 years. So it could have taken 3.5, total 4 years, you know, max. But for me, it took a while because I was
Right.
having to take one class here and one class there. So
Okay. Okay. But I mean, the journey is definitely different for everyone. And to see that
right.
for those out there who, like you, are not able to do, hey, I can just put everything off and go to school, and
Mhm.
I have
Yeah,
support from somebody or what have you. For those, not everybody have that. And so
yeah,
seeing that you can
absolutely.
still achieve those goals, just taking your time, doing what you gotta do and get there. I mean, that's inspirational in its
Hmm.
own because it doesn't mean you have to give up on your goals, right?
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
so yeah, no, thank you for going through that and going over your journey to getting into, from MA to LVN and then RN. Currently, as an RN, what are some challenges, especially in your telemed setting? What are some challenges that you've encountered?
I also worked ER too. Well, I've worked two jobs. Nurses always have two jobs. I no longer can do that anymore, but I worked ER and I worked, stroke telemetry. And I will say in both settings, um, challenges are still trying to um, prove, I think, to you know, other people that you know what you're doing. There's still the stigma, in my opinion, that when patients of different ethnicities come in, they kind of have that doubt, like you don't know what you're doing, or they have these stereotypes about um, you know black nurses.
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
my challenge.
Mhm.
Um, are not being able to move up as fast as you would like to. Like I worked charge nurse and stuff like that because immediately. And one of the things I will say this just to sidetrack a little bit, uh, my experience, I wouldn't, take it back because my experience made me such a stronger nurse because I
Yeah.
just know things that other people are just not going to know, right?
Mhm. Experience,
Because
right.
my crime was different. No, not only that, my maturity level was a
Mm.
lot different from the nurses that I've worked around. Like I said, a lot of them are very young, and nothing against young nurses because they're brilliant and they're smart, they're innovative. They show you quick things, but I can connect with patients on a different level, I believe,
Mm.
because I do have that level of maturity versus them not having as much as that patience.
Mhm.
But so just to go back to what we were saying is that my challenges are sometimes people just not wanting to listen to what I'm saying, even though I'm
Mhm.
educating them until somebody else comes along, and educates them or experiencing that of not wanting me just based on my skin color. I think that's the most hurtful to me. But
Mhm.
aside from that, just learning how to handle death, you know. It's just you start connecting with the patient and then you come back the next day and they're gone. That kind of hurts,
Mm. Mm.
believe it or not,
Mm.
because we're still human. Although we're not supposed to cry and, in front of patients and different things like that, we do step aside and, because we're human, we're not robots,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
those are some of my, biggest challenges is dealing with death after you,
Mhm.
become acquainted with the patients and the family and everything like that, and them wanting to reach out to you, on a personal, level, and you're like, oh, I can't do that, but you can always come up here and visit or whatever. But yeah, that's some of the challenges. Just keeping that boundary, and then not allowing any negativity from someone else's perspective or ignorance to change who you are and you know why you came into the profession in the first place. So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I usually sort of wash it over my shoulder when I do see or hear a patient who's like, oh yeah, I don't want to see that PA, and they want another provider because they'll just have a fairer skin than me, and I'm just like, 9 times out of 10, I'm just like, you know what? It's
yeah,
not about my
mhm,
abilities, and you didn't even really get to know my
of
abilities as a
course.
provider. So
Mhm.
there is
Mhm.
just nothing I can do about that. Like, I'm not gonna go bleach my body to come and, serve you and take
Right.
care of
Right.
you. So it is
Yeah.
disappointing. I'll tell you that for sure. But
Well,
it's
and yeah,
one,
it really is, especially in this day and age.
yeah, yeah. Is you're just like, okay, you come in with such, I'm sure as you do, such positive attitude, ready to care, but when you sort of get
Mhm.
punch a little bit, you're like, oh, okay, that's what it is. Okay, well, good
Mhm.
luck. I'm gonna refer you to my
Mhm.
other non-black caregiver here, or nurse or PA, and yeah, it is odd that we are still dealing with those circumstances nowadays, but it's things we can change,
Mhm.
right? Things we can change.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because now over the telephone, I get a lot of patients because we book for the providers, the PAs, the nurse practitioners, and the physicians, the MDs and DOs. And
Mhm.
so a lot of patients will be like, I don't want to see a nurse practitioner, I don't want to see a PA. And I
Mhm.
educate them right from there, and I tell them, I say, this is a provider. They're able to prescribe, and the thing is that they're able to order x-rays and do all these things that you need to get you seen. I said, and believe it or not, um, PAs and nurse practitioners are becoming, pretty popular because we're trying to close that gap because there's a huge gap of
Mhm.
providers right now. So,
Mhm.
and a lot of times especially the nurse practitioner, uh, if they've gone through what I've gone through, they have a amount of knowledge, because,
Right.
they've taken steps. And most nurse practitioners already were a nurse before, because that's how
Mhm.
you get there. You're a bachelor's prepared nurse, and then you go and get your master's. And even the PAs, they still have to do so much, hours and schooling and different
Mhm.
things like that, and just all this, didactics and everything. So,
Yeah.
I have to kind of, you have to get out of that stigma that MDs know all, because a lot of times there are MDs who don't really know, you know what I'm saying? Because they're fairly new themselves, believe it or not. Because when we were on the
Mhm.
floor, when I was on the floor, a lot of times the MD, like I had a patient one time, for an example, that had hiccups, and I asked him, I said, is there any way you can, help with the hiccups? And he was like, well, what should I give him? I said, Thorazine. But because I've been a nurse, because even as an LVN, you're still a nurse, but because I've been a nurse for so long, he called
Mhm.
back and he was like, that's a psych med. I said, I know, but it helps with hiccups,
Mhm.
so like,
Mhm.
so they, believe it or not, they don't know um, every single thing.
Right.
And so I still kind of experience that, but I do try to educate on my part because PAs and nurse practitioners are not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, they get more work than the MD sometimes. But because they're trying to free up more time of what the MD needs to work on, but still they do.
Right.
Trust me, I work close hand in hand with them, and they work super hard.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah.
so I get a
Yeah.
lot of that with the telemedicine. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's definitely that, like, oh, you're not a doctor, and I'm like, no, I'm a PA, but I'm here to help. But yeah,
yeah,
it's a lot of
absolutely,
education for
absolutely,
sure. Not just from us, the mid-level or
definitely.
advanced practitioners, but from the medical team as a whole, like you do as an
Hmm.
RN and so forth. So
Hmm.
definitely appreciate it, getting that patient
Hmm.
education going on. I'm gonna start wrapping up here, but I did want to ask you any word of advice for
Sure.
anyone wanting to get into nursing, and especially with your wealth of experience, what would you tell them?
you know, um, Nursing is a challenge. I
Mm,
know that people on social media make it look glamorous, because there's travel nurses that are driving Teslas and living this luxurious life, but that's not everyday nursing. Most nurses do not do travel nursing because they have families and they
mm-hmm,
live just a traditional life. And so a lot of times um, they don't know what goes on the floor or behind the scenes. And so it's not until they get on the floor that they're like, this is not for me. I truly believe that nursing and medicine and all, it has to truly be a calling. It can't just be for money because you're not going to do it long term. You're just going to go in it for the money and then
mm-hmm.
you're going to, abandon it. And just like, all the other struggles aside from that, even on the phone, people are like, oh, you must not be from around here, from Southern
Oh,
California. And it's like,
wow.
no, I'm from Southern California. But, you still
Yeah.
get those stereotypes. But,
Mhm,
so you really have to have, you know, um, the passion for
mhm,
it. And if you have the passion for it, this is the best, career ever. That's
mhm.
satisfying and rewarding. So
Mhm.
I just don't get in it for the money. Please get in it for the passion and looking at patients holistically and just, put yourself in their situation because we're taking care of people in their most vulnerable state.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting you say that. What I've noticed in as I'm my years of practice of slowly packing on is that some patients do feel like because they're on this receiving end of your service and you're the one who has to be professional, that they can sort of say anything, even sometimes the most inappropriate thing, and ask for
Hmm.
the weirdest things.
Hmm.
So don't be alarmed if you're caring for someone and they ask you off the wall questions or say off the wall things. You just gotta learn to refer back to your professionalism and say no if it's just a very odd question like, oh, can I touch your hair or something? Like, no, you cannot. Thank you. Let's go back to talking about your labs, please. like, and
Yes,
like,
yes.
so like just because you're the caregiver, in whatever position, not just use a caregiver because whether you're a doctor or LVN or MA, you are giving care. So just because you're in the caregiving position and you are in the professional setting doesn't mean you have to take all the possible BS that may be coming at you. You just gotta learn to, avoid it and go back to professionalism and say no professionally. And they should be able to accept that. I really appreciate your time today on this 3-day. Hopefully you're getting a 3-day weekend. On this 3-day weekend that we
No, I'm
start.
working. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I'm
get
working
some
all the
rest.
way through. So,
Always working.
thank you.
But yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And you're sharing some light on your experience and so forth. Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you have a beautiful 2-day weekend as you're having, and enjoy the sunshine.
Yes, you do the same.
Thank
Nice to
you.
meet you. Bye bye.
Likewise. Bye.
Alright, audience, that is all I have for you today. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. If this is your first time here, a warm welcome. And if you're a returning listener, I appreciate you coming back. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, and connect on all social media. Till next time, ciao!